The forest was quiet and cold and full of fog. Jason walked alone with his old backpack and flashlight. He had lived near these woods for 5 years. Far away from the noise of the city and the pain of the past, he liked the silence. He liked being alone. But something felt wrong today. The air was heavy and the birds were gone. He followed a strange sound like metal scratching, like something broken and alive. He moved through the trees with slow steps. He found a deep line in the ground, like something had crashed and slid through the forest. Broken trees and smoking dirt showed the path. Jason followed the line for 10 more minutes. Then he saw it, a small silver object half buried in the ground. Not a plane, not a drone. It looked alive, like it was breathing. He stepped closer and his flashlight flickered. Then he heard a soft cry like a child, a small cry full of fear and pain. He turned fast and then he saw here a girl. She looked about 10 years old. Her skin was pale blue. Her hair was silver and glowing. Her eyes were bright like stars. She wore a thin silver suit. She was sitting near a broken tree. Her leg was hurt and her face was full of dirt and blood. But her eyes looked at Jason without fear. Jason froze. He had never seen anything like her, not on Earth, not in any movie. She looked like a child from the sky. She said something in a strange voice. Jason could not understand the words, but he saw her pain. He moved closer and knelt beside her. She pulled back a little but did not run. It's okay, he said. I will help you. You're safe now. The girl watched him carefully, then slowly gave him her hand. Her hand was cold and shaking. Jason wrapped his jacket around her. He picked her up in his arms. She was light, too light, like she was made of air. He walked back to his cabin, looking behind often, afraid something was following. The forest felt different now, not natural, as if eyes were watching. He reached home, his small wooden cabin, with no neighbors. He laid the girl on the couch. She looked around with wide eyes like she had never seen a house before. Jason gave her water. She drank slowly, then looked at a picture on the wall. A photo of a woman, Jason's wife, gone many years ago. The girl touched the photo gently. Jason cleaned her wounds. She did not speak, but she watched everything, like she was learning. Later that night, Jason sat at the table. The girl was sleeping on the couch. He looked at her clothes, silver cloth that felt soft and strange, not from Earth, not from anywhere known. Around her neck was a small pendant, round and glowing with blue light. He touched it. Suddenly it came to life. A soft hum filled the room. A blue light floated in the air. Jason stepped back. A hologram appeared, a giant city in the stars of crystal ships flying across the sky, and one word written in a glowing alien language. He could not read it, but the pendant said it out loud in a soft voice. Royal protocol activated. Jason blinked. What was this? Who was this girl outside? The wind blew harder. The sky flashed like something was moving far above the clouds. Jason looked at the girl. She was not just a lost child. She was something else, something powerful, and now she was in his home. He sat down beside her. She moved in. Her sleep, said a word he did not understand. Jason whispered, "Don't worry, I'll protect you, whatever you are, wherever you're from." But deep in his heart, he felt something had changed. His life was no longer simple, no longer quiet. The stars had come to his door, and the story was just beginning. Morning light came through the old window as Jason opened his eyes. The strange girl was still on the couch, wrapped in a blanket. Her glowing pendant had dimmed, but he could hear a soft hum from it. Jason made tea in the kitchen while watching her from time to time. She looked peaceful now, not like last night when the hologram showed stars and strange words. She slowly opened her eyes. For a moment she looked lost. Then her eyes met Jason's, and she sat up quickly. Jason raised his hands to show he meant no harm. He said hello with a calm voice. The girl looked at him but said nothing. Jason brought her tea and bread. She looked at it, then back at him. He took a bite first and smiled. She copied him and chewed slowly. Her movements were careful, like she was learning for the first time. Jason pointed to himself and said, "Jason." Then he pointed to her. She looked confused. He repeated, "Jason," and tapped his chest. After a pause, he pointed to her again. She whispered a sound. It was soft and strange. It sounded like Leah. Jason smiled and said, Leah, she nodded. That name felt familiar to her, like it came from somewhere deep inside. But she could not remember where or why. Jason started to teach her words. Cup, chair, door, light. He pointed and said each word slowly. Leah repeated them with care. She was smart and fast. She learned faster than any child Jason had ever seen. Later, Jason gave her paper and pencils. She drew shapes, circles, stars. A tall tower with rings around it. A glowing tree with floating leaves. Jason looked at the drawings and felt a chill. These were not things from Earth. That night, Jason read an old storybook to her. She listened with wide eyes. Her pendant glowed slightly as he spoke, as if it understood the words too. Jason noticed her hands, sometimes sparked with small lights. Tiny blue flickers that danced across her fingers. One evening, while Jason was outside chopping wood, Leah stood near the window. She raised her hand. The cup on the table shook. Then it floated, only for a second. Then it fell and broke. She looked scared and ran to the corner. Jason came in and saw her hiding. He knelt down and told her it was okay. He had seen it. He had seen the cup float. She looked up at him with teary eyes. He smiled and tapped his chest. Still Jason. Still your friend. That night Leah had a dream. She was in a giant hall made of silver and glass. Tall beings stood around her, all wearing robes and crowns. One knelt and said something in a voice she almost understood. A voice said, "Protect the heir." Then there was fire and screams. A hand pushed her into a pod. The stars rushed by. She woke up with a gasp. Jason was already awake, sitting beside her. He gave her water and listened as she spoke strange words. He could not understand, but her fear was clear. He showed her the pendant. It pulsed with a new light. He touched it again. A different hologram appeared. This time a map of stars, lines connecting planets. Symbols blinking in red. At the center was a crown symbol, and the word soulless. Jason whispered the word slowly. Soulless. Leah looked at the symbol. She touched it, and the hologram zoomed in. A royal city appeared. A palace in the sky, statues of winged beings. A throne empty and alone. Jason sat in silence. He could feel the truth growing inside him. Leah was not just from another world. She was someone important, someone born of power and purpose. Next day they went to town for supplies. Leah wore a hoodie to hide her face and glowing eyes. Jason told her to stay close. They walked through the small store. Leah pointed at colors and toys and small snacks. She was curious and careful. Outside the store, two men stood near a black car. They wore suits and glasses. Their faces were calm, but their movements were too perfect. One of them looked directly at Leah. She turned away quickly. Jason felt cold inside. Man spoke into a device. His voice was low and sharp, searching. Still in grid 4. No confirmed location, no contact. Jason grabbed Leah's hand and walked fast. They turned down a side street and hurried back to the truck. Leah sat quietly looking out the window as they drove back. Jason knew now something was coming, something not from Earth. That night Jason checked the pendant again. He looked deeper into the files. One locked file blinked with a strange symbol. He clicked it. A message played. An alien voice speaking in a soft tone. Translated by the device, it said, "If you have found this child, you must protect her at all costs. She is the last light of Soulless, the heir of the star throne. They will come for her. They will not stop." Jason sat back in his chair. He looked at Leah. She was drawing again, smiling, peaceful, a child. But he knew now she was more than she seemed, and soon the stars would come knocking again. The sun was hidden behind thick clouds as the wind moved through the tall trees. Jason stood near the window of his cabin watching the forest. With quiet eyes, Leah sat on the floor, drawing symbols with a stick on an old notebook. Her pendant glowed softly every few minutes, like a heartbeat from another world. Jason had not slept much since the message played. The words still echoed in his mind. Protect her at all costs. The last light of Soulless, the heir of the star throne. They will come for her. They will not stop. He turned away from the window and walked to Leah. She looked up and smiled, her eyes still shining like twin stars. Jason sat beside her and pointed to the symbols. He asked her what they meant. She touched one and whispered something soft, a name maybe, or a memory. He could not tell, but she seemed to remember more each day. Later, they drove to the town again for supplies. Jason parked the truck far from the main road. He told Leah to stay close and keep her hood up. She nodded and followed him like a shadow inside the store. Jason picked up canned food and batteries. Leah stood near the window, looking at the sky. She whispered a word he did not know. A ship flew high above in the clouds, but it was too fast to be normal. No sound. No lights, just a shadow cutting through the sky. Jason looked outside and saw a black car parked near the gas station. Two men stood beside it, wearing dark suits. They had no badges, no logos, and no warmth in their eyes. One held a scanner shaped like a silver rod. It beeped once, then again. They turned slowly, scanning the area. Leah stepped back and hid behind a shelf. Jason quickly paid and led her out the back door. They moved fast through the alley toward the truck. Jason opened the door and helped Leah inside. He turned the key, and the engine roared to life. The men in suits looked toward them. One raised a device and spoke into it. Target near location. Confirmed. Signal stable, awaiting orders. Jason drove fast through the back roads. The trees rushed by and the wind howled. Leah looked back with fear in her eyes. Her pendant glowed brighter than ever. Jason gripped the wheel and pushed harder. They reached the cabin before sunset. Jason grabbed his tools and checked every window and door. Leah walked to the center of the room and stood still. She closed her eyes and raised her hands. The pendant floated just above her chest. Blue circle formed around her. Symbols danced in the air. Jason watched in silence. She opened her eyes and said a word, safe. Jason walked toward her and asked what she did. She pointed to the door, then to the pendant. She was protecting the cabin. Some kind of shield, maybe. Jason nodded and smiled. That night, Jason opened the pendant files again. A new file had unlocked. It showed images of a tall city made of gold and silver, beings with wings and light walking through the streets. At the center stood a palace with a glowing throne. Leah pointed at it and said, "Soulless." Jason repeated the word, "soulless." Suddenly, a loud noise came from the woods, a sharp hum like metal singing. Jason grabbed his flashlight and opened the door. He stepped outside and looked around. The trees moved with the wind, but something else was there. He saw a black object floating above the ground, small and round with a single red eye. It scanned the area, then turned toward him. Jason stepped back slowly. The object rose higher and then flew away fast into the clouds and out of sight. He ran back inside and locked the door. Leah looked at him with wide eyes. Jason nodded and said, "They are here." She walked to the window and touched the glass. Her eyes changed for a second, like a memory returning. She saw something others could not see. 3 ships hiding behind the moon, watching, waiting. Jason turned off all the lights. They sat in the dark, listening to the night. Leah leaned against him. She was just a child, but she carried a secret larger than the earth. Jason knew the time was coming. Visitors from the stars had found them. Not all of them were kind. He remembered the men in suits, their cold eyes, the scanner, the message. He looked at Leah, her face calm but strong. He whispered, "We will run if we must. We will fight if we must, but I will not let them take you." Outside, the wind grew louder, the forest darker, the stars brighter far above the earth. A signal was sent. Target locked, prepare for contact, and deep in the pendant, another message waited to be heard, a voice from the stars, a warning from the past, a path to the future. The sky was quiet, but Jason felt the weight of many eyes above. He stood on the porch of the cabin, watching the stars as the cold wind moved through the trees. Inside the cabin, Leah sat near the fire with the pendant floating in front of her. It spun slowly, showing soft blue lights and ancient symbols. Jason came inside and closed the door with care. He looked at Leah and saw that she was no longer the same scared girl he found in the woods. Something in her eyes had changed. They were deeper, wiser, filled with something old. The pendant blinked 3 times, then projected a new image. A tall man with silver skin and long robes stood inside a hall of light. He spoke in a voice like music. The translation played in a soft tone. "To the one who holds this light, you are the last of the soulless line. The throne is empty, and the stars grow dark. Return and awaken what was lost. Jason watched the message in silence. The man looked like someone important, a leader, a king maybe. Leah stood and walked closer to the image. She reached out and touched it. The image shifted to show a family of 3, a man, a woman, and a child with silver hair and blue eyes. Leah stepped back. Her hand touched her chest. She whispered something. Mother, father. Jason placed a hand on her shoulder. He said, "Is that you?" She nodded slowly. Her voice cracked as she said the word again. Mother. The pendant flashed red, and the image turned dark. Smoke filled the screen. Screams echoed through the cabin. Soldiers in black armor stormed the palace. The woman tried to shield the child. The man stood with a staff of light and shouted words that shook the hall. Then came fire explosions. The child was carried away by a cloaked figure placed in a pod. The stars rushed by once more. Jason looked at Leah. She trembled. Tears fell from her eyes, but she made no sound. He knelt beside her and said, "You are the child. You are the heir." She looked at him and nodded. Outside, a sharp sound broke the moment. Jason rushed to the window and saw movement. In the trees, a flash of silver, then nothing. He turned back to Leah. She held the pendant close. It glowed brighter than ever before. Jason said, "We need answers." He took an old laptop and connected the pendant with wires and tools. The pendant resisted at first, then it opened. A voice spoke again. "Royal security, unlocked heir verified history files ready." Jason clicked on the first file. It showed a galaxy map. Solus was at the center, a powerful kingdom with peace and knowledge, but it had enemies. A group called the Hollow Crown. They believed power should belong to the strongest, not the purest. The Hollow Crown attacked the palace during the Festival of Stars. They took control and destroyed the royal family, but one child was saved, sent to the safest place in the known galaxy, a small blue planet with no starships and no war. Jason felt a chill. Earth. They had sent Leah to Earth. He opened the next file. It was a warning. If the heir is found, the Hollow Crown will send hunters. They will blend with local people. They will use machines and lies. They will search until the bloodline is gone. Jason leaned back. He remembered the men in suits, the black drone, the shadow in the sky. He knew now that they were already here. Leia stood in front of him, her eyes glowing bright. She said, "We must leave soon." Jason asked where. She pointed upward. Home. A soft knock came from the door. Jason stood up and grabbed his tool. He moved slowly and opened the door. A cracky man stood outside, tall with a metal mask and glowing eyes. He raised his hand slowly and spoke in a soft voice. "Do not fear, I am not with them." Jason looked into his eyes. They were not cold like the others. They were tired and full of sorrow. The man said, "My name is Renix. I was royal protector of Solus. I failed to save the king, but I followed the signal and found her." Leah stepped into view. Renix knelt on one knee and bowed his head. He said, "Welcome home, Princess Alara." Hassan looked at Leah. Alara, her real name. Leah took a step forward. She did not look afraid. She looked like someone who remembered who she was. Renix said, "We must leave before the eclipse. The Hollow Crown is near. They will burn this place to dust if they find her here." Jason said, "I will go with her. I will protect her." Renix nodded. He reached into his coat and pulled out a silver orb. He placed it on the ground. It expanded into a glowing circle inside. It was a ship hidden in another space. Jason stared in shock. Renix said, "Pack only what you need. We leave at dawn." Leah looked at Jason. He smiled and said, "I guess we are not in the woods anymore." Above the forest, a red light blinked once. The Hollow Crown had found them. The sky was still dark when Jason opened his eyes and heard the distant hum of something not natural. He sat up quickly and looked out the window toward the trees where the wind moved without sound. Leah was already awake, sitting cross-legged on the floor with her hands glowing softly as she focused on the pendant. Renix stood near the door holding a long silver staff that pulsed with light like it was alive. Cabin was quiet, but something in the air felt wrong. Jason stepped outside and looked around. He saw no birds, no light, no movement. Then a ripple passed through the sky like a curtain of energy pulling back to reveal the hidden Truth, 3 black ships floated above the clouds, barely visible, but full of silent power. Renix walked out beside him and spoke with a calm voice. They have arrived sooner than I hoped. The Hollow Crown does not waste time when the throne is at risk. Jason asked, can we stop them? Renix looked at him with tired eyes and said, not alone. But the girl is not alone anymore. Suddenly the ground shook and a sharp whine filled the air. One of the black ships fired a beam toward the forest clearing just behind the cabin. Flames rose and smoke followed. Jason ran inside and grabbed Leah, who stood still as if listening to voices only she could hear. She looked at him and said, they are not here for the earth, they are here for me. Jason held her shoulders and said, then let us make them regret it. They moved quickly, packing only what they needed. Renix activated the hidden path to the ship using the silver orb. It opened a gate of light that led to a hollow space between moments, where time did not move before they could enter. A black drone crashed through the window. Jason hit it with a metal pipe, but it fired a shockwave that threw him across the room. Leah raised her hand and the pendant flashed. The drone froze midair and shattered into pieces with a sound like glass falling into water. Renix helped Jason stand and said, they have started the hunt. We must end it now. Jason grabbed the toolbox and nodded. If they want to fight, we give them one. They ran outside and saw more drones flying toward them. Jason activated old traps around the cabin. Wires snapped and sparks flew. 2 drones exploded and one slammed into a tree. Renix swung his staff and sent a wave of light that cut through the air like fire. Leah moved through the battle with calm steps. Her hands glowed as she blocked the attacks and pushed the energy back. With waves of force, one drone reached Jason and fired a sharp blast. Renix jumped in front and blocked it with his staff, but the force knocked him to the ground. Leah screamed, and the pendant released a burst of light that stopped everything for one breathless moment. Time seemed to freeze. Then the light pulled back into the pendant. Jason helped Renix up. The protector's armor was cracked, and his face was pale, but he nodded. We must reach the gate now, or we will all fall here. They ran through the smoke and fire. Jason carried a small bag with tools, and Leah held the orb that showed the way. As they reached the clearing, more black ships appeared above the trees. One opened and a figure dropped down from the sky, tall and covered in black armor with red lines glowing across his body. The figure removed his helmet, revealing a face too human, yet too perfect. Eyes like mirrors that showed no soul. He spoke in a cold voice. The child belongs to the Hollow Crown. Step aside, and you may live. Renix stepped forward and raised his staff. You will not take her while I breathe. The man smiled and moved fast. Faster than any human. Renix blocked the first strike, but the second hit his side. He fell back with a cry of pain. Jason ran forward with a metal rod and hit the man's back. It bent and snapped without effect. The man turned and threw Jason aside like a broken toy. Leah screamed again, and the pendant glowed bright white. The ground split and energy poured out. The figure stepped back, shielding his face. Leah walked forward with calm steps. You will not touch my family again. Not here, not ever. The figure laughed and said, you are no queen. You are just a child hiding on a dying world. Leah raised her hand and the sky answered. Lightning without sound struck the ground around her. The trees bent and the ships above shook. Jason crawled to Renix and helped him up. Together they watched Leah shine like a star born on earth. The figure charged again, but this time he could not reach her. A shield formed around her pure light. He struck and was thrown back. Leah walked to Jason and held his hand. We must leave now. The orb opened the path and they stepped through into the light. The gate closed behind them just as the forest exploded with fire. The black figure stood up slowly, his armor cracked and eyes burning with rage. Find them, find her, bring me the throne. But they were gone. Gone beyond his reach. For now the light around them faded and silence wrapped the space like a blanket of calm. Jason opened his eyes and saw nothing but silver walls and floating lights. The floor beneath his feet felt soft like energy, not solid ground. Leah stood beside him with the pendant glowing bright. As always, Renix leaned against a wall holding his side where the armor had cracked during the battle. They were no longer on Earth. The ship that held them was alive. Its walls breathed softly, and its lights moved like they were thinking. Jason looked around and asked, "Where are we?" Leah smiled and said, "In the heart of the Stargate." A soft voice echoed through the room. "Welcome, heir of Solus. Welcome, guardian of flame. Welcome, chosen earthling. Prepare for transit to the throne system." Jason raised an eyebrow at the title. Earthling Renex nodded and said, "The ship recognizes your loyalty and courage. You are no longer a stranger to our ways. You are one of us now." The room shifted and became a wide window to space. Jason gasped as stars stretched in long rivers across the dark planets. Glowed in colors he had never seen: blue rings, golden storms, moons with fire on their surface. Leia stepped forward and placed her hand on the control panel. The ship responded with a hum. A path lit up ahead. "The throne system lies beyond the hollow rift." Jason looked at Renex and asked, "What is the hollow rift?" Renex answered with a low voice, "It is the last line of defense, the oldest wall between peace and the storm. If we pass it, we reach the capital. But if they find us there, we may not leave." Again Jason nodded and walked to Leah. She looked stronger now, not just in power but in spirit. She was no longer the lost child in the woods. She was a queen in the making. The ship entered the rift. Space folded around them like a tunnel of color, and wind lights flashed as they moved faster than thought. Suddenly alarms echoed, red lights spun. The voice of the ship warned of incoming. Presencerin ran to the control seat and shouted, "They have followed us." Jason looked out and saw 3 black ships forming behind them, sharp like knives, silent like shadows. Leia stepped into the center of the room, her eyes bright, her pendant lifting into the air. She whispered to the ship, "Initiate royal defense pattern, Solus Code 7. The ship responded. Energy shields formed around them, weapons activated without sound. The ship danced through space like it was alive and angry. Jason held onto a rail as the room shifted. A blast rocked the side. Another ship tried to block their way. Leah raised her hands and a beam of light fired from their ship. The enemy vessel broke apart like glass in fire. Renox shouted, "One more, and then we are clear." Jason saw the last ship move above them. It prepared a large weapon, too strong for their shield. He looked at Leah, who stood silent like a statue of light. Then he moved. Jason grabbed a manual lever on the wall, one he had seen earlier, a last resort cannon. He pulled it without knowing what would happen. The ship responded. A core cannon charged the floor. Vibrated energy filled the air. Then a beam fired so bright it turned the stars white. The last ship was gone. Renex looked at Jason with wide eyes. "You just used a weapon of the first crown. Only royal blood or bond can trigger that system." Jason looked confused. Leah smiled and said, "Maybe the ship sees something we do not." They passed the rift and space became calm. Ahead was the throne system, a group of planets circling a giant blue sun. At the center floated a ring of light. Inside the ring was a city of glass and crystal towers reached into the stars. Ships moved like birds in the sky. Leah walked forward, her voice soft. "Home." The ship landed near the palace gates. A group of royal guards stood in formation. Each one wore silver armor with blue emblems. At their front stood an old woman with silver eyes and long robes. She stepped forward and looked at Leah. Then she bowed. "The line is not broken. The light returns. Welcome, Queen Alara of Solis." Leia bowed her head and said, "I return not as a child, but as one who has seen the stars fall and rise again." Jason stepped out and looked around. He felt small among all the beauty, but also part of something greater. Renox placed a hand on his shoulder and said, "The stars remember those who protect their future. You have done more than most." As they entered the palace, a shadow passed over the sun. Jason looked up and saw something that made his heart freeze, a black mark in the sky, moving, growing. Leia looked at it too. She turned to Jason and whispered, "They are not done." "Not yet." Jason nodded. "Then let them come." The Palace of Solus stood tall under the glow of the twin moons. Its towers shined like crystal, and its halls whispered with the voices of the past. Queen Alara walked through the grand corridor with Jason and Renex at her side. Guards bowed as She passed, but their eyes showed fear, not of her, but of what was coming. The hollow crown had crossed the stars. A fleet of shadow ships now circled the throne system. The sky was filled with dark shapes and heavy silence. No words had come from the enemy, no threats, no message, just presence cold and heavy like winter air. Alara stood before the Star Council. Elders and advisors filled the chamber with long robes and quiet minds. They looked at her with hope and worry. She was young, she was untested. But the pendant shined at her chest, and its light reached every corner of the hall. Jason stood behind her, unsure of his place in this world of shining walls and floating lights. But Alara looked at him with the eyes of someone who never forgot. The forest, she spoke with calm strength. They have come for our crown. They believe we are weak. They think the last heir is just a child, but Solus is more than a crown. It is light, it is memory, it is family. Enoch stepped forward and placed his staff at her feet. The protector bows only to the one who shines true. The council stood and bowed. For the first time in years, the throne was no longer empty outside. The palace, the shields were raised, energy flowed through ancient lines buried deep within. The planet ships of Solus launched into the stars, not for war, but for defense, to protect the last hope of the old ways. Jason was given a command seat aboard a smaller ship. At first he felt out of place, but the crew treated him with respect. They had heard the stories. The Earthling who fought with a broken rod and stood beside the Queen. Alara boarded the royal ship. It was shaped like a phoenix with wings of light. She stood at the front, watching the stars. Her mind was clear. She could feel them, the hollow crown, watching, waiting. The first attack came without warning. Black ships dived through space, firing waves of dark energy. The Solus fleet moved to intercept. Light clashed with shadow. The sky became a storm of color and flame. Jason gave orders with steady hands. He had learned fast. Trust the ship. Trust the crew. Trust her. Alara stepped onto the upper deck of her ship and raised the pendant. A pulse of light spread from the core. Enemy ships paused as if blinded. Solus vessels moved in and pushed them back, but then a massive ship appeared, larger than any seen before, black as night, with red veins glowing like fire. At its center stood a figure, the one who led the hollow crown. His voice filled the air across every ship. Alara, you run from what you are. Come face your end or watch your people burn. Alara answered with calm voice. I do not run, I rise. She flew toward the enemy ship alone. Her own ship followed, but she sent a signal. This is my fight. Jason watched from the screen. His heart beat fast. He wanted to stop her, to protect her, but he knew this was her path. Alara entered the dark ship through a broken gate. She walked alone into the throne room of her enemy. There he stood, tall and cold, his armor sharp like blades, his eyes full of pride. You are no queen, he said. You are just a me. Moriella raised her hand. The pendant floated between them. It pulsed once. Then again the throne behind him cracked. The ship shook. He charged toward her, fast and full of fury. She stood still, then opened her eyes wide. Light burst from her body. Not fire, not force, but memory. The throne of Solus responded. It rose from the floor and called to her. She stepped forward, each step breaking the shadow. He tried to stop her, but his power faded. He swung. She caught his arm no more. She said, you ruled with fear, I rise with light. The pendant released its final power, not to destroy, but to restore. The ship broke apart, not in flames but in light. The hollow crown faded, its leader lost in his own shadow. Alara returned to her ship. The sky now clear, the stars at peace. She stood before her people once more. They cheered, they sang. The Queen of Solus had risen. Jason met her at the gate. He smiled and said, you saved us all. She smiled back and said, no, you found me when I was lost. They looked at the stars bright and endless, and knew this was only the beginning.